Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope the heavy meal you had is fading away, so then you can keep your eyes open. Let's listen to some of the music while you are keeping your eyes open. Sorry about the, I think audio is not working. Actually, a little while ago you have seen some of the statistics which may shock your thoughts, or sometimes you might have experienced some of these things, because in the business environment you might have invested a lot of capex and opex, but end of the day you may not get the value you expected to this investment. This is some of the typical scenario we experience in most of the organizations. So actually I had a couple of questions sometimes back in late 2011. Why this is happening? Why this kind of observations is occurring? So what are the reasons behind it, and are there any precautions we can take to minimize this observations or minimize this impact of these occurrences? So then in late 2011, I was thinking about do a research on for my MBA program. So then I thought I'll do something which is relevant to the industry, which is IT industry which I am working, as well as the business, because most of the time IT is working as a isolated industry which is not taken care of by the business. So then I thought I'll do some research which is relevant to the IT as well as the business. So I thought to analyze this problem, analyze this observation. Why businesses are investing so much of money on these IT projects, infrastructure, software development, software applications, ERP applications, but end of the day they have not realized the benefit. They have not realized the expected benefit. So what are the reasons behind this? And are there any mechanisms or frameworks which we can minimize these drawbacks and get the maximum advantage of the investment? So when I start my research, there are a couple of objectives I had. One is identifying most critical factors influencing IT effectiveness. This is the one objective I had. And second one is order of importance. Prioritize identified factors. There can be so many factors which influence IT effectiveness, and out of that, what are the most influential factors towards IT effectiveness? Strategic orientation. Because most of times we have observed that most of the business organizations, even the CXOs, are preparing strategic plan or preparing a strategy for them, but there is a misalignment between the IT strategy as well as the business strategy. So business is going towards one direction and IT is going to another direction, which is not compatible. So end of the day, the expected value of IT investment will not realized by the business organization. And finally, I wanted to build a framework for high effectiveness. Let's say that if organizations are willing to have effective IT infrastructure as well as IT systems, so how they can take precautions and how they can do their next IT investment using this framework. And apart from that, I wanted to encourage the Sri Lankan business community to do research on these things, because in Sri Lankan context there are very less people who are very specific professionals who are doing research on these areas. So then I wanted for business organizations, so business people as well as IT people to do research on this IT effectiveness and how we can optimize the benefit of IT. So this diagram depicts basic for this research and the scope of the study. Mainly I wanted to do the research based on Sri Lankan mid-sized organizations. There's a reason behind it, because the large organizations and the mid-sized organizations there are certain commonalities as well as a disparity between these organizations, but with regard to multinational organizations, there are a lot of influence coming from the global perspective and their global head. So I wanted to eliminate that part, so I disregard the multinational organizations and small enterprises because they are not matured enough to have effective IT infrastructure as well as IT software systems. So I wanted to focus my research on large organizations as well as medium-sized organizations. I will describe a bit about the research methodology I have followed. The literature review, I have gone through about 100 odd articles, books and other magazines, and based on that I have defined the framework. For the literature review I have used a couple of softwares. One is Mentally and MindGenius to do my work easy, and the research framework consists of 6 independent variables as well as 6 independent variables as well as 1 dependent variable. And the IT effectiveness is measured through organizational performance, because I was trying to find some kind of framework which we can measure the IT effectiveness. So I found out that there are not solid mechanisms available in the industry. So I thought to measure IT effectiveness through organizational performance based on the Balanced Scorecard perspective, 4 perspectives. And I have assessed the 6 independent variables using 48 questions and 20 questions used for assessing the organizational performance based on the Balanced Scorecard principle. And to triangulate the data I have gathered, used quantitative data as well, using a 5 for interviews. Now we talk about the factors influencing IT effectiveness. The first one is, actually we can categorize these factors into 3 different categories. One is the internal factors, which is common to most of the organizations, which is inside the organization, and the external factors, basically like political, economical, technological, social aspect, the personal aspect, and the organization or industry specific factors. So based on these categorizations, I have defined the conceptual framework for my research like this. These are 6 independent variables and the dependent variable. Let's talk about pillar 1. That's degree of alignment between IT strategy and business strategy. So I was looking through a lot of articles how to measure this alignment. So then I found out a couple of attributes. One is contribution to strategic decision making. That means when corporates or CXOs are preparing their strategic plan, what kind of contribution you can provide to IT, their decision making process. And based on this I have designed my questionnaire. Actually I am not going to show all the questions, but I am going to talk about what are the basic criteria I have used to measure each and every pillar. Then the IT capabilities to reshaping business strategy. And what are the capabilities you have in your organization, IT capabilities. and are those capabilities are reshaping your business strategy. And then the role of IT to meet customer expectations, because this is the most important thing for a business organization. So, are your IT is supporting to meet the customer expectation? Then improve business agility, because today morning also most of the speakers talk about business agility and about the big data and all. So, is your organization IT is supporting to improve your business agility? For example, let's say like if you are a financial company today catering to the leasing and loan market, and sometimes you may need to go into big investments in future. So, is your IT infrastructure and systems are supporting to that type of business expansion with different industry or different perspectives? So, how your IT infrastructure is supporting them? And is your IT is supporting as a catalyst or working as a catalyst for organizational growth? Let's say your business organization is defining a strategic plan to have 8% revenue growth or 8% market share expansion in next 3 years. Is your organization's IT have capabilities to do that? This is the question. So these are the criteria I have been using. And the last one for the alignment, business requirements to IT solutions process. That means how fast you can provide IT support for changing business requirement, or how fast you can create a IT infrastructure and systems to support your business requirement. This is the research response I have received for this aspect. You can see almost linear relationships or linear correlations between alignment between IT strategy and the IT effectiveness. Next we'll move into the pillar 2, leanness of the business process. Today most of these business organizations are talking about the lean implementation or streamline the business process. So in my questionnaire, I have assessed this leanness of the business process through criteria, degree of waste elimination. That means how far your organization's business strategy and the operation strategy contributing to degree of waste elimination. And level of integration among processes, because this is very important for an organization. Today morning also most speakers talk about collaboration. Today, there's no point having isolated systems like finance, account, sales, CRM, and so many systems in different, identically not connected with each other. So today is all about collaboration. All of the systems, all of the industry verticals has to be working across the functional silos. Then process standardization. That means how far your business processes are aligned with best practices. And effectiveness of the processes, because most of the time people misunderstand effectiveness and efficiency. So if you have chosen the right processes, that means effective processes. So those 4 criteria are used to assess the leanness of the business process. This is the response I have got from 153 respondents. Next we'll move into pillar 3, competency level of internal IT staff. Because this is also a very challenging aspect for an organization, because today the technology is moving fast. It's rapidly developing. So the organization has to invest large amount of money to keep their skill level up to date. Because technology is obsoleting day by day. As today morning also the keynote speak addressed about, you can have one technology, one particular concept, you can get maximum advantage just for 1 year. So organizations have to invest large sum of money to building their employee competencies. So competencies comprises of 3 segments actually: skills, experience and knowledge. Basically with regard to the internal IT staff competencies, we have to think about their analytical skills, communication and soft skills. Basically, most of the time IT guys or techies are not possess soft skills. So that's a major challenge when we are communicating, because always there's a gap between technology and the business. So bridging this gap, the IT guys should have business skills as well as business guys should have IT skills. So when we are evaluating the competency level of internal IT staff, we have to assess these skills. So I have used these knowledge, skills and experience to assess the competency level of internal IT staff of these respondent organizations. With regard to the experience, customer focus as well as strategic orientation, that is also very important, and the domain experience. Because if your IT guys have many experience on different domains, not only the one domain, different domains, they are exposed to most of the challenges, so they are very competent than one guy who has 20 years or 30 years experience in the same industry. So that is valuable to provide effective IT in your organization. With regard to the knowledge, technical knowledge as well as business domain knowledge and the business management skills. So those are the key skills I have used to evaluate competency level of internal IT staff of these particular organizations. This is the response. This graph also shows that almost linear relationship between competency level of internal IT staff and the IT effectiveness. Pillar 4, project and portfolio management practices. This was assessed based on the project management framework. How far they have aligned with project management practices as well as framework. Are they practicing the framework? Like Interop, Prince2, P3O, like. And effective PMO. Whether these particular organizations have functioning effective PMOs, and what is the impact of this one towards the IT effectiveness. And management of portfolios. Are they doing the right thing? Mainly portfolio definition, right thing, and portfolio delivery. Doing the things right is basically vision. This is the response I have received. We'll move into the next pillar, leadership style and organization culture. Organization culture has largely influenced towards the effectiveness of most of the business process in organization, not only the IT, but here also I found that towards IT effectiveness, there's a huge impact from the organization culture as well as the leadership style. This was assessed based on transformational leadership. That means how far leaders are transformational, how far leaders are willing to change, willing to take challenges, and willing to challenge the status quo. So those were assessed using the questionnaire. And providing vision and roadmap. This is also important because if the employees in the organizations are not knowing where they are going and if they don't have a vision, so you will get, you will not get impressive results. And are these leaders are motivating employees to achieve challenging goals? That is also important. And the risk-taking ability of leaders. Are they risk averse or are they not willing to take risk? And employee empowerment. Because most of the highly structured industries like banking and insurance, most of the time they are very regulated through their parent organizations or apex body. But if the employees are empowered to make decisions within their scope, so those organizations will going far ahead than others. So using this criteria, I have assessed their leadership style and organization culture. With regard to the organization culture, learning organization culture, and adaptability to change, and how far their organization culture is willing to change or willing to learn, and problem solving style. Because most of the time, organizations have their committees and teams to solve their problems, but they are not participating with each other. So that will impact your organization's growth. And employee participation for change-related initiatives. Are they reluctant? Are they passive towards the change-related initiatives, or are they active on change-related initiatives? Using these criteria, I have assessed the leadership style and organization culture. This was the response received, almost linear relationship. The last pillar, scale of IT investments and resource allocation. Without having proper investments and the resource allocation, even human resource, time and all the other materials, organization will not achieve good results. This was assessed using quality of infrastructure, disparity investments, IT versus other projects. Because most of the time, CXOs, or basically CEOs, are willing to spend any amount of money towards projects in marketing, or maybe other sectors, but not IT. They are sometimes reluctant because they don't they don't have proven results of the value of delivery through the IT investments. They might have bad experience. And comprehensive information systems. Whether these particular organizations have implemented comprehensive ERP systems or CRMs and likewise. And like I was serious in adopting technology, whether these organizations are lagging behind or taking the proactive role. ROI of IT projects. This was the result. And to measure IT effectiveness, I have used balanced scorecard for perspectives. This customer, financial, internal process, and learning and growth. This was assessed using the criteria listed here. I'm not going to explain each and every because time is running out. And this was the result of IT effectiveness based on the annual revenue of organizations. There is no significant variation based on the annual revenue other than the 100 to 500 million revenue generated companies. And this is the sample analysis. It covers, I think, almost all the industries in Sri Lanka. Major parties contributed through banking, finance, manufacturing and apparel sector. And this was the total respondents analysis based on the revenue generated by each company. And these were some of the qualitative data analysis I have received through top executives in the 5 companies. One insurance company, leading insurance company, and telecom company. The questions what I have asked for the interviews, why some business leaders fail in effective technology adoptions. They have mentioned different responses. This is another question. What is your opinion about BPR or business process re-engineering? And this was the response given by one of the director and leading shipping company and vice president of another shipping company. It's another question. Does your organization follow formal project management practices and manage using PMO? Most of the top executives are really value the advantage of PMO, but sometimes due to different reasons they could not achieve these things. They could not achieve to develop their PMOs in effective manner. Now, I'll take you through the findings of my research. This is the framework I have prepared based on the results of the respondents I have received. You can see the level of influence of each factors and the maturity of IT based on this one, and you can see that alignment between organization's IT strategy and corporate strategy or the business strategy has highest influence towards the IT effectiveness of their respective organization. That is a significant factor. And if you are planning next IT project in your organization, you can use this framework to assess your current status and set your defined status, set your desired state, and take necessary actions to bridge the gap between this current state and the desired state. So that's why the key advantage of using a maturity framework. So your organization may be in initial stage or practicing stage or maybe iterative stage, but you have to define what is your current state based on your organization analysis, and you can define your future state, where you want to go, and you have to define strategies based on that. So these are some of the key recommendations. Encourage board level representation of IT and use comprehensive enterprise architect frameworks. Actually, since the time is running out, I don't want to show each and everything. The other one is competency development. To develop your competencies in your internal IT staff as well as the other staff, you have to increase the investments in skill development as well as enhance PPR and project management skills to optimize your processes. Next one is behavioral and cultural readiness. You have to inculcate positive attitudes towards change and culture in organization. You have to teach your employees how to challenge the status quo and how to do things differently. And you have to motivate the employees to achieve challenging goals within their capacity. And management practices, lean implementation, streamline process through BPR. This might be a costly project, but it will deliver real value to your organization. And continuous improvement, that's a Kaizen kind of approach you can follow to continuously improve your processes to support your strategy. And following appropriate project management framework, there is also one recommendation on, and establish an effective PMO. Because centralizing your project management activities throughout the organization will give immense benefit for your organization. And finally, I would like to pay my gratitude and appreciation towards my research supervisor, Dr. Travis Berra here, and other professors and the faculty of the PIM, and all the respondents, and my family too. And